Well, so in part one, I talked about the genetic uniqueness of our pre-Columbian ancestors, and one thing I didn't get to speak on, especially when talking about Prognathism, is how they try to link that to the Big Bang Theory and people coming from hominids and monkeys, but we know our ancestors did not come from no monkeys. And the easy way to put that into perspective is, for one, the monkey is susceptible to lice. The people who say our ancestors came from monkeys, they're susceptible to lice. We don't get lice. And as you can see, they're saying that the oldest lice combs in America was discovered based off of a Brazilian mummy. And these lice combs have been found in Chile, Brazil, and even in the US. So this lets you know that there's also an ethnogenesis that went on too, because not everybody's ancestors are susceptible to these problems. And in this document, they're telling you that one of the oldest known medical documents, the Ebers Papyrus, includes a treatment for lice using powder made from dried dates. Now, the Ebers Papyrus is actually a book that goes all the way back to ancient Egypt, and it's full of herbal remedies, and it also has herbal spells. Same thing with the Smith Papyrus. It also goes back to ancient Egypt. Only difference is this one is more going into the body, like the central nervous system. Like these folks was doing brain surgeries way back then, working on dental teeth, because you know you got buccal nerve endings all in your teeth. And the same thing in this document. You got remedies and you have spells. Same thing with the Ramessean Papyrus. This is why it's so important to know the genetic uniqueness of our ancestors, because when we see things like this, head lice, hair nets, we know that doesn't tie to our ancestors, not within their origin. And it's important to also understand that when we get into some of these old narratives, especially like when you get into like the biblical narratives, because we have came to the understanding, a lot of us have came to the understanding that America is the true old world and it actually is the land of the Bible. But when you get into certain narratives like the land of milk and honey and things of that nature, we got to ask the question, what does the land of milk and honey mean to a people that's lactose intolerant? And this is coming from the Student Medical Association. They're telling you that the relationship between African Americans and dairy is shaped by a complex history of higher rates of lactose intolerance, limited access to health care, and dietary patterns influenced by systemic inequities. See, to have the genetic ability to drink milk outside of your mother past the age of infancy is a condition called lactose persistence. So you have what they call lactose persistence, lactose intolerance, and also lactose malabsorption, which kind of falls in between the two, meaning that the body does not produce enough of the enzyme to properly be able to process lactose, which means that the body will end up having side effects similar to lactose intolerance. So these are kind of genetic telltales to let us know who's who. We can tell who's lactose intolerant, who's lactose persistent, and who falls in between the two. And that's really a deep thing, because according to the American Vegan Society, they tell us that America's first milk was actually vegan milk. But in the same breath, they'll also tell you that Wayne's Wabanaki Indians were claimed by white European visitors to have domesticated reindeer and fallow deer for their milk. A 1605 report by British explorer James Rozier relates that the local Indians make butter and cheese of the milk they have of the reindeer and fallow deer, which they have tamed as we have cows. So remember, we're lactose intolerant, so we know this is not our ancestors. And we can even see when lactose intolerant people have cow milk-based baby formulas like this stuff. Just last year in July, a jury ruled that a manufacturer was to pay out $495 million to a family of a baby facing permanent health complications due to NEC, which is a gastrointestinal disease called nectarizing enterocolitis. And notice the suffix of that disease had itis on there, just like, you know, the saying in the culture go like, ooh, I got the itis at the folks and got fooled off of something. But notice that itis is actually a disease characterized by inflammation. And, you know, actually inflammation is the start of damn near any disease. And it's important we keep this in proper perspective, because these schools really did have us eating pizza and drinking chocolate milk 11 in the morning. And it's real important that not only do we talk about the loss of our sovereignty in totality, but also the loss of our food sovereignty, because now you got the descendants of lactose intolerant people eating the cheese and drinking the milk, walking around gassed up, bloated, farting, and not thinking nothing of it. And then when we get into the honey situation, we can look into this document from Dublin University out of Ireland. And they're speaking about the antimicrobial properties of honey. And if you saw my bleaching process video, we talked about the Hadza tribe and how they had the healthiest gut microbiome in the world, to the extent where scientists literally go out to the forest and steal these folks' dookie load just to study it. And if you look below me, they tell you that ethnicity consistently captures gut microbia to a slightly stronger effect than other variables such as BMI, age, and gender. And the research would tell us that if the Hadza tribe was to have antimicrobial foods, it would affect them just as it would any other population. So now we got to think about what it's doing to us. And If you look below me, they also tell you that honey is actually within their diet, but the honey they have and the honey we have is two different honeys, because honey is based off of the nectar sources of the vegetation that is surrounded by the bees, meaning that, you know, some people like that shop at Whole Foods, like they're familiar with like Manuka honey, but there's all different types of honey. You got eucalyptus honey, buckwheat honey, avocado honey. It's all about the nectar source, and the vegetation that they have and the vegetation we have out here is two different type of things. To the extent that the vegetation around us is being referred to as green immigrants, meaning that a lot of the vegetation is not of this land. And like I stated in the bleaching process video, it's not just about the sun and clothing that's playing a role into our pigmentation. It's also the food. And shout out to the sister from Suriname that was putting us on game, letting us know that the brothers and sisters out there are actually having allergic reactions to the rice that the foreigners are planting, which made me do some research, and I came to find that there's a condition called rice intolerance, and it actually has the same symptoms of lactose intolerance. You know, gastrointestinal issues, bloating, gas, diarrhea, constipation, all that. And that's the thing with living in this system. They're actually taking us from our natural state and trying to push us into a whole nother type of, you feel me? Like we see it with the sisters every day with the weaves and the wigs, but a lot of people unknowingly ain't realizing the brothers too with the waves situation. Like when you look at these chemicals, it's actually taking your hair from a natural state to a whole nother type of state. Even when we get into the wisdom tooth situation, you know, they've been taking our wisdom teeth since the times of Plato, back when they called it the teeth of wisdom. But even in the late 1800s, they was writing about the different techniques they was using and the injuries people was facing, you know, jaw fractures, nerve injuries. They was even taking opium and diluting people's pupils with it, like all type of stuff. Even Pliny the Elder actually talked about wisdom tooth, and he said that in man, the wisdom teeth grow last at about the age of 20, and in many cases even at 80, but only in the case of persons who did not grow them in their youth. And it is certain that in old age they fall out and grow again. So now we got to ask the question, especially for people that got tricked out of their stuff to get them pulled out. You know what I'm saying? Does the scar tissue play a role in, you know what I'm saying, them not growing back? Also, what is inhibiting them from growing them back? Because we haven't really heard nobody talk about, hey, so I done got mine put out and they done grew back. And then when we break it down on the level of sound and vibration and how teeth can affect your voice, in a study back in 2019, they told us that people who had mouths with a larger frontal area, they were suited for what they call opera singing. And those who had larger mouths overall projected more powerfully, which is something we definitely see among our people, especially the singers. Because, you know, for one, when you get into the science of gap teeth, you know, that's actually seen more in quote-unquote black people than any other ethnic group. So while we on that topic, those who have it, don't close it. Let your beauty be beautiful. Because changing the alignment or the shape of your teeth can change your voice, but this is only noticeable in singing or other extreme vocalization that pushes a person's expressive limit. And you can see that after you watch my video, go watch this video. They actually catch the notes of each note that she hits and let you know if it's supported, unsupported, or strange. She ends up hitting a G6. And a G6 is an extremely hard note to hit, and it's actually considered a sacred frequency because it's associated with heart chakra activation and DNA repair. And another way that they corrupt our frequency and sound is by these rhinoplasty surgeries. And they tell you that performing rhinoplasty on an African-American patient does not mean tweaking the procedure used on Caucasians or other ethnic groups and balancing it with ethnic characteristics. Instead, in many cases, the procedure is different in every respect because we're different in every respect. And I'm saying that to say, leave y'all noses alone. Let your beauty be beautiful. Because again, they're trying to change us from our natural state. A secular change in the skull between American blacks and in this document, they tell you that American colonial blacks have higher frequencies of prognosticism, and overall, they typically have stronger Negroid features than your current blacks. Because even when we look into forensics, they say the skull is considered the most useful part of the skeleton for the assessment of race. And when we look into the genes of the Native American skull, their genes is not present in Europeans or Africans, but is in a high frequency in East Asians and essentially fixed in Native Americans. And it's also associated with tooth mortalities, hair type, and sweat gland density. And it also has impacts on the ear, including lobe size and attachment. Remember, attachment. And when we look into the tooth morphology, they also tell us that that's linked to what they call a mongoloid premolar or oriental premolar, which is sometimes called the dens evangeliatus, because the anomaly occurs almost exclusively in individuals of East Asian ancestry or what was historically referred to as Mongoloid races. And there's multiple scientific articles that tell you that the dens evangeliatus has been reported almost exclusively in Asians, Inuits, and Native Americans. And when we look into forensic dentistry, right below me, they tell you that shovel teeth are more common in Asian, especially Native American populations. And then below that, they even say that these traits are the most traditionally utilized in forensic identification. And it's so deep that DNA retrieved from dental material can be analyzed for general indicators of ancestry or physical features, including eye, hair, or skin color. And when we look into this guy, Felipe Guzman, who was a Quechua nobleman and considered a chronicler, he wrote in 1613 that when mulattoes, a mixture of Negro and Indians, produce quadroon children, these children lose all physical trace of their Negro origin except for the ear, which still gives them away by its shape and size. And when we look into this article from 1915, they're telling us that the true Negro ear is small, almost flat, and close to the head. So remember how I said earlier about attachment. So you have what they call detached ears and attached ears. The true Negro ear is small and attached. And to put that in perspective, according to 23andMe, they're saying that 82 to 90% of their research participants have detached ears, and only 10 to 18 have attached ears. And of course, you know, different races do have different ears, and they're telling you that in this report, and they're even letting you know that this can be utilized in forensics for personal identification of living or deceased people. And I even throw another clue out there. If you want to look into like Olympic gold winners and also like some of the quote unquote best dunkers in NBA history, look at the ear. Which leads me to this document, The Primitive Man in Ohio from 1892. Gonna start the paragraph below me. We cannot overlook the fact that the crania and skeletons examined by us, many of them excavated by our own hands, approach somewhat the Negro in their anatomical characteristics. They are those of an inferior race, Dodge the hijack, with strong meso and branchocephalic affinities. None of the characteristics of the Mongolian or of the Mongoloid types are present in any of the Ohio cranium which we have examined. They are evidently those of a people whose racial type was created and fixed on the American continent, in other words, the American race.